Hey guys, new video for Path of Exile. So this video we're going to go over a different type of armor stacker for the Scion. This one isn't really running Transcendence, and I think it's sort of like the middle ground between like a cheaper Doriani's build and the Transcendence builds. So this build is basically max block with no glancing blows. You can see that we do have about 70% chance to attack block attacks and 64% to block spells. Now this is going to go up while we're in combat, so if we're attacking we get extra block thanks to the Guardian Ascendancy, and whenever we cast a spell we're going to get more spell block. So we have two spells. We have the Grace Aura that we're basically spamming, right, and then we do also have the Molten Shell, which is counting it as spell, so when we push Molten Shell we do get our spell block. So we're not using Glancing Blows, which is pretty awesome. You see here, don't have it allocated, so we're basically pure block, and that means basically if we block something we don't take any damage. And with Aegis Aurora too, every time we block we are going to be healing ourselves with the basically up to full because of the amount of armor we have. So this character is also running 100% spell suppression. So we have here 100% spell suppression chance while we're affected by our Grace Aura because of the Watcher's Eye. So basically the defenses of the character is going to be just spell suppression, you know, pure block, and that's about it. All right. So there's just those two defensive layers, and actually the block part is actually coming in like pretty nice. Like it's you can do some funny things with this, right? Like obviously this build can't really tank really big hits like the Transcendence build, but I think this one will be a little bit better versus degen, well actually quite a lot better versus like degen effects than some of the cheaper Transcendence builds, because well we do have 90 max res, and we are having quite a decent amount of energy shield regen, about 2,500 just sitting in hideout, and in combat that will go up to about 3,000, a little bit over 3,000. So that's actually going to be quite nice. You can stand in degen puddles. You only really have to avoid very big hits. You obviously can't take, you know, slams, big slams and this kind of stuff on this character, but thanks to the block actually there's some funny things you can do. Like for example, I was able to tank the Atziri double flame blast and take 0 damage from it because I blocked both hits, which is kind of funny actually. I mean obviously not really recommended you do that on this type of character. It's better to rely on your block as sort of like a, you know, you try to avoid the big hits, and if you do accidentally get hit then the block might save you kind of thing, because you definitely can die from those kind of things. So definitely not as tanky as the other Transcendence builds, but I think it is relatively cheap. I mean I am using kind of expensive items on this character because I was actually planning to make this with the cheaper gear without the Nimbus, without the Mage Blood, but I just had some trouble getting Dex and my Cold and Lightning resistance, and I think you can solve those problems like that. That was actually the only two problems with not using the Mage Blood and Nimbus. And you can solve those problems on your gear and on your clusters, like on your ring and stuff like this. But I was just kind of too lazy to recraft all of them. Alright, so let's do a few little showcases real quick. Okay, so first of all, we do have a feared map we'll go into. So it's sort of the same map we're doing on all of these kind of builds. Alright, so we did find the feared. They're just up here. So let's go and kill them, see what happens. I kind of want to show you what I meant with like the block, the spell block kind of thing. Being able to tank actually like one-shot abilities, and if you get lucky, I mean it's 75% spell block basically. So you know, if you do get lucky then you can survive these kind of things. But let's just see what happens. Here we have the feared. You see we can kind of stand in this degen and be okay. I think if we're attacking we get a little bit more ES regen. But let's just kill off, like, say, the Elder. And, yeah, you can see now that Flame Blast actually did hit us, but thanks to the spell suppression, we're able to actually reduce the damage, you know, a good amount. See, we can kind of sort of be in the degen, so you're not really as vulnerable to a lot of degen, I guess mainly because you're having 90 max res, and that really does make a difference. So, see if we can get Atziri to do some Flame Blast for us. You can see we blocked that one. Oh, and that one did kill us. Well, I guess, yeah, if you get hit on these big abilities, then you probably will die. Yeah, and that's where this build is a little bit weird, right? Because you don't really have the max hit to take a lot of these big hits, but you kind of feel like you can because a lot of the time you're just blocking the hits. And then one of these hits eventually might get through, and then you're just going to kind of die like that. But yeah, overall, I really did like this character, actually. Been farming T17s, like the Scarab farm on it. It's been pretty nice. A little bit slow, right? Because I'm not using, like, you know, full awakened gems and all this kind of stuff. Let's just see if we can get Azeri to do some stuff for us one more time. So that one we actually just did block. Maybe this one we can block too. Yeah, see, like right there. Take like no damage because we actually just blocked the hit. So pretty cool, but let's just kill him off real quick. There we go. Alright, so a little bit about the build. So I think this build is sort of like you're in between, right? So it's sort of, if you say you're playing the Doriani's prototype build, you don't want to play Doriani's prototype, but you don't really want to play a cheap Transcendence build because those can have a few problems, especially with degen, because you don't really have that big of an energy shield pool and your max res isn't really going to be that high. So degen can sort of hurt, and say you don't really want to have to deal with that. And then if you know, if that's like kind of how you're thinking, then this would probably be the Scion build to do. Overall, I think it's pretty good, but probably the Jug versions might be a little bit better. So, you know, but this is kind of like, you know, hey, I want to play Scion, but I don't want to build Transcendence yet, and I don't want to build Doriani's prototype. Like, what do I do? So this is probably the build you would play. Alright, so let's go into POB real quick and check out some of these stats of the character. Alright, so this is the character. You could see our stats over here. We have about, you know, close to 600k EHP. It doesn't really matter that much. Our Fizz max hits 100, 126 on the Elemental. It's like with Molten Shell up, of course. So you can take those off and you can see it's a little bit lower, you know, 60k, 70k, that kind of stuff. So not really the highest EHP, but you can see the spell block, the block chance, the spell suppression, very nice defensive layers, and we have some pretty nice energy shield regen. As for damage, yeah, Molten Strike, you know, just Molten Strike, it's sort of like not really that many expensive damage items aside from the Nimbus and Mage Blood, I guess, right? We're missing quite a few, like, you know, introspection clusters. You can see we are only using these 8 passive clusters. So, you know, overall the gear is, I don't know, I would say like maybe 500 divine, 600 divine so far. I will have some cheaper POBs up in the Armor Stacker Compendium. You can go check out for like the one I was planning out to do before I just decided to use the Nimbus and Mage Blood thing. Oh yeah, let's go into how we're building the character. Okay, so first of all, let's go into how we are getting our block. Then we'll go over, you know, spell suppression and the rest of that kind of stuff. So for block, mainly a lot of it is coming in from 3 of these these large clusters here. We have this one over here with Riot Queller, which is giving us 4% attack block. It also does give you enemies taunted by you take 6% increased damage, which is quite nice because Scion is always going to be taunting enemies thanks to the champion ascendancy. And then we have a prodigious defense. So this gives us spell block and attack block like this. So we have actually 3 of these exact same clusters. And the funny thing is all of 3 of mine managed to roll fire resistance. So it's kind of funny. But yeah, just 3 of those. And then we are taking this shield block here. This is giving us quite a lot of spell block here, about 16% spell block on this little cluster. And then the last little bit is coming in from the, or not the last little bit, but we're getting some more from the Watcher's Eye over here. And then the last little bit of block is coming from the Guardian Ascendancy. So whenever we attack, we have 10% chance to block attack damage, and if we cast a spell, we get 10% chance to block spell damage. So that's basically where the block is coming from. And this does sort of pose some problems because, you know, like endgame Scion does want to use these like voices, 3 passive voices, you know, 1 passive voices and that kind of stuff. And when you start to do that, well, then you're going to be losing quite a lot of your block and then your defense. So, if you get to like the very end game stages of Armor Stacker, then probably you're going to be switching over to a Transcendence build from this one. You know, once you start getting the voices, three passive or 1 passive or whatever, then it's probably better just to move on to the Transcendence build, because by then you'll probably have like close to 90 max res, and that'll be quite a lot better than this one. Alright, so how do we get our spell suppression? So spell suppression on this build, not really that hard, but not really that easy either. So let's say we do have some on the body armor. Mine isn't really all that great. It's only a tier 3. You can get up to tier 2 on this one here. And then I have some on my gloves, on the explicit and the implicit. And then we are getting Magebane, a few little nodes here for spell suppression. And I think that is about it. Oh yeah, and then we do have a mod on the Watcher's Eye over here. So that's basically where we get the spell suppression. Right, as for the rest of the gear, so for the helmet and the body armor, these are actually the ones I made in the crafting videos I just put out. So I have a helmet video and a chest video, and these are the 2 items I made in the video, so you can go check those out, how I made them. The gloves too, it's I don't know, it's pretty much similar to how you would craft any Armor Stacker glove, but instead of maybe attack speed or intelligence, you go for the spell suppression. And then for the implicits, you know, you can't really get flat energy shield, I think, so you just go for the hybrid energy shield evasion. That's about it. Ring 2, this is kind of like a really, you know, like jerry rig ring. In the beginning, I wanted to keep this build, you know, cut the cost down quite a bit. So you can see here, we're using a ring that just has int, energy shield, fire resistance, and then has, you know, the meta mod for 3 crafting modifiers, and then reduce mana cost of skills and non-channeling. So this means we don't need to use any veiled orbs. Actually, this build, none of the items we use in this build are using veiled orbs. So that is quite a nice bonus. So that's sort of basically the build overview, right? We get our block chance, we get our spell suppression, and that's about it. So as for the gear, you see here for the sword, we do need a RT sword because we are going for the precise technique thing over here. All right, so for the helmet, basically, yeah, you don't really need to use the Delve fractured helm over here, but you can. It's just gonna mean you lose a +1 strength. It's not really the end of the world, doesn't make that much of a difference. I wanted to try this kind of one out. So made this. For body armor 2, basically you just need a grasping mail that has spell suppression on it. That's sort of the main thing we need. Alright, so we are using Alt Uprising because it is quite hard to fit in all of our auras with no voices and this kind of stuff, especially also because we're running Tempest Shield. So we do have 1 more aura that we have to fit in. So Alt Uprising is going to be with us pretty much all the way on this build. I think it's the amulet of choice. Even I tried fitting in Ashes in like a higher budget version in POB, and it was quite hard to do. It did lose quite a lot of energy shield, and in this version of the build, the amount of energy shield you have is quite important because that is the best way to increase your EHP, probably after getting spell suppression capped and stuff like that. So let's see. So for the Aegis, I think I got this for quite a very good deal, right? It's got the spell block and Fizz taken as. But basically, yeah, I just prioritize the spell block because that's going to be the hard one to get. So get, you know, just get like a single mod one. The PTA mod is really not really that impactful. All right, so Nimbus, we have a couple other setups we'll go over later on in the video, the budget setups and the end game setups and that kind of stuff. But after that, the rest of the gear is pretty kind of standard. You can go look in the POB and see what you think. For the passive tree, this is also pretty much exactly the same sort of passive tree that I'm using for all of my armor stackers, except we are just taking Magebane and we're going for these little suppression nodes to get us capped. Now, if you do need more spell suppression, then what you can do is you can unallocate this node here, maybe put a point over here. There is some more spell suppression over here that you can take. And worst case is basically you remove all your stun tattoos and you put spell suppression here. That's going to be like 22, 24, 26% chance to suppress spells. And then you have to get stun immunity on a flask. So that means probably remove the regen flask for a stun immunity flask. And then you can get quite a lot more spell suppression on the tree. That's kind of up to you if you want to do that. And then basically, yeah, the block, right? So these clusters are pretty cheap, but yeah, just get your block over here. And yeah, that is sort of the tree, you know, not like Not like super complicated, but we're just going for the spell block and the attack block. All right, so let's take a look at some of the gems. A lot of them are going to be sort of similar to what you're using for Armor Stacker, so not that many things to cover, but we have our movement skill and our mark set up in one weapon. And then we have our aura setup, one aura setup over here in our helmet, and then another aura setup in our gloves. Now, one thing to note, you don't actually need a level 23 purity on this build. Now, usually you do need a level 23 purity to get your 90 max res, but on this build, actually, well, you don't really. If you're running a Mage Blood and a Ruby Flask with the increased effect, then you are going to be at 90 max res, even if you don't have a level 23 purity. So that's kind of nice. It takes a little bit of pressure off of the glove craft because you don't really need to have a +2 unveil here. I guess you could always put your purity of fire in your helmet, but not really ideal because you want the discipline and wrath and determination here for the extra levels, for the damage and extra energy shield. So that is kind of nice for this build. After that, we have our March of the Legion boot grace setup over here, and the gem links is just like a standard Molten Strike link. You can kind of customize this for different skills like Lightning Strike. You could do Smite and skip out on the Nimbus and get another ring here. That'll work as well. You could use even like Splitting Steel and that kind of stuff. I guess the only problem with Splitting Steel is I don't think that's a melee attack, right? So you're probably not going to get Fortify, which might not be that great. But yeah, so you could customize this to use quite a lot of different skills. At the moment, we're using Molten Strike. All right, so we have a few more auras over here: Purity of Elements, Tempest Shield, and Molten Shell, and that's sort of the skills. All right, so quick view for the Pantheon. It's just Arakali and Relicash, what I'm always using. Oh yeah, so I did sort of forget to mention we are taking the Raider Forbidden Flame Jewels because this gives us like 20 spell suppression. So that's kind of nice. I mean, not really that good for damage, right? We do get phasing, which is quite nice on Armor Stacker. We get frenzies. The Onslaught is not really impactful because I'd rather have the increased effect Onslaught Flask. But the Frenzy Charge is quite nice for damage. So moving forward, let's take a look at a couple of different POBs that I've made in the Armor Stacker Compendium, going over different budget types. Alright, so here we are, the Armor Stacker Compendium, and this is the build we're looking at today. So this medium one is the one that we were playing right now. First of all, let's go over the cheaper version, how we were building it. So you can see on this one, it is actually quite a lot cheaper. There's no Nimbus, there's no Mage Blood. The only really expensive item that we're going to be using is like a CB, Unnatural Instinct, because there is really no other way to get it right now, unless you do sacrifice some block chance, and then you would need like 4 points, and you can grab a jewel socket over here. We can't really replace the Raider Forbidden Flame. We need it for spell suppression, so that's pretty much the only thing. You're going to need 4 points to do something, so it's probably going to be maybe the Fire Regen Mastery until you can buy one, because I guess you don't really need that much regen, or maybe the block area, and then this one node here, you take that out, you get 4 points here, you get your jewel. But in the end of the day, CB maybe even not that needed, because you can just get the Pantheon on the Solar Relicash, and you should be able to out regen 3 to 4 stacks of CB just by your base ES regen. Okay, so this build is using Formless Flame for the fire overcap. Then we're also using a Sadist Garb, right? Because I guess I was thinking, Grasping Mail might be expensive. Make one of these, but yeah, sort of similar. Here we have our spell suppression. That's pretty much all we're trying to get, and then some regen, fire resistance, then high ES and evasion, I guess, right? This build, that's pretty much all that's the same, except that we're not using the Nimbus. The gloves are the same. We're using Tides of Time and quite a lot of magic flasks over here. So we get some more flask sustain from the flask belt, the Tides of Time, and we do have 25% increased effect, so that's quite nice. The rest of the gear is pretty much all the same. So technically this build is going to work. See, the damage is quite a bit lower because we're not using a Nimbus. That's pretty much the main thing, is there is no Nimbus in this build and the Mage Blood is gone. Alright, so we already went over this medium one over here. Let's go over what it would look like if you really want to invest into this build. So first of all, quite a lot of energy shield. You could see 6,000 energy shield. EHP a bit higher, you know, our max hit has gone up to 140k on the elemental. DPS is up by quite a bit. You can see 130 million DPS. We still have all of our block. That's because I guess we are still running the what do you call it, the large clusters. We're not even running voices. And this version here, the main thing is that you see we're using a synth helmet, a mirrored synth helmet. Now this is actually going to give you quite a lot of damage and defense, but it is quite costly, right? And end of the day, if you're going to be swapping over to a Transcendence build, then instead of this helmet, I'd say go for the physical taken as helmet instead of this, because I mean, then you can use it on your Transcendence build if you ever do decide to swap over. One other thing we're doing is we're removing one of our enlightens so we can fit our vitality in the helmet, and that's because this helmet has the, you know, socketed gems get 92% cost and reservation multiplier on the implicit, so that allows us to actually remove our enlighten from the helmet and fit in 4 gems over here. That means our vitality is actually getting quite a lot of levels, and this build has like 5k ES regen comment. It's pretty insane. All right, so we do have a mirrored grasping mail. There is none of these on the market right now, but yeah, you just kind of use what you get. Just probably, you know, for this you do need spell suppression on your grasping mail, so it is in a bit of a weird spot, because if you do want to go Transcendence, then you don't need the spell suppression. So I would say just continue using your crafted one that we made over here in the medium budget. Just keep using this all the way to the end. Maybe get the Grace implicit all the way to max. That's probably pretty much all I would do on it. And instead of going for like some mirrored one with global defense and spell suppression and that kind of stuff, because that, I mean, that doesn't even exist in the game right now. Yeah, aside from that, we actually did get enough spell suppression in other places too, so now we can actually use some sorcerer gloves instead of the evasion energy shield hybrid, because we don't need it on the explicit anymore. We just have it on the implicit, and we're getting quite a bit more spell suppression. You can see that we're actually coming up here, taking a few little points here, and also getting a tattoo, like 2 tattoos for some spell suppression, and we are able to cap out the spell suppression. So able to go back to the ES base, which is quite nice. We get a lot more energy shield, and I think that is going to be it for all of these gears. Oh yeah, we do also have the mirrored ring over here, but aside from that, I think everything else is basically the same. All right, so if you ever get to that's sort of like the end of the road for this build, I would say like there isn't really much you can do to push it even higher, because like I said, you're going to use voices, you're going to lose all your block, and then your defenses might not feel as good. But maybe it'll work, maybe it won't, you know, who knows. I'll leave that up to you to test if you're interested. But once you get past that point, I'd say just go and do one of these Transcendence builds. You should be able to jump into one of these high budget setups. You know, if you have one of these kind of helmets, you have the grasping mail, you probably have the gloves, you have the, you know, pretty much you have all the gear but the Dawnbreaker and the Utmost, and then I guess the voices, right? So I would say, you know, this, if you ever get to this high budget point, then just swap over to one of these fire overcap Transcendence builds. Okay, so I did make one with 2 swords as well, since, you know, we don't really need a shield technically, because we don't need to get any, you know, fizz taken as and that kind of stuff. So you could do something like this. I mean, you know, max hit not really all that great for this build. This one is using 3 passive voices, and basically all your defenses is going to be spell suppression and armor. That's pretty much it. Oh, and I guess 90 max res. So not super tanky, but and I haven't even tried this, guys, so this is kind of like use at your own risk. If you want to go one-shot something, but you probably will get one-shot every now and then. This build is using a different Watcher's Eye. It's got ES on hit and spell suppression. So, but yeah, that's kind of how I would build it with 2 swords. You can kind of see doing a little bit some of the things a little bit different, pretty much exactly the same. We're just not taking any of the block stuff. And I think that's about it. All right, so that'll be it for this video, guys. Let me know what you think in the comments, but I think this build is a very nice build to transition to. If you'd like, say, you don't want to play Transcendence on a low budget, or you just don't even want to play Transcendence at all, right? Because maybe on a lower budget, you have to rely on a flask for a lot of defense, and if you don't really like that kind of gameplay, or that you don't want to have that problem, then this build will probably be the one to play. I mean, that's if you want to play Scion, right? You're dead set on Scion, it's got to be a Scion, then it's probably the build you play. Otherwise, I'd say probably go play a Juggernaut or Marauder, or Chieftain or something like that. But yeah, it's kind of one of the in-between kind of builds. Alright, so I know I said I was going to do a Pathfinder, and sorry, I got a little bit distracted with this Aegis block one, so I guess, yeah, we'll go over to the Pathfinder next, I guess. But yeah, that'll be it for this video, guys. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.